Hello to my fire signs, Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. Welcome to the Gemini full moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising signs listed below. Hello Aries rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon, happening on November the 27th at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. And if you are near me on planet Earth, have a look to the eastern horizon at 8:15 on Monday night, because as the moon is rising, it will be its fullest. So it's going to be cresting that eastern horizon and coming into our view at the moment of impact. Now, Gemini is a sign that is full of conversation. There's definitely a strong feeling of duality in Gemini, as represented by the twins maybe, also by the Lovers card in tarot. And the reason that we sort of sew in the significations of this card into our understanding of Gemini is the glyph, as astrologer Alan Oken says, can be read as two mirrors and the refraction of light and love that bounces between the two of them. So we think about connection, we think about how we relate to folks that we care about, how hopefully we can see ourselves in their nature and they have the opportunity to see themselves in us too. It's not all light with the Lovers, it's not all light with Gemini. There's a lot of shadow, and it's our kind of responsibility as compassionate human beings to understand and respect and to nurture the shadow when it becomes difficult. So check your chart, check your birth chart to see if you have any Gemini placements and see where you might be being triggered at this time. I do suspect that there might be some tense reactionary words that crop up around this time. Every full moon's pretty emotional if you're in tune with it. If you're not in tune with it too, it can be pretty full on if you're unaware of what's going on. For you, Gemini rules your third house, Aries rising. This is the house of the goddess. This is where we learn to communicate with language. It's our local environment and it's our private rituals, how we go about the day in thanks to the goddesses, to life, to nature. So maybe at this full moon, you can reacquaint yourself with your own personal goddesses. I've been learning so much about our access to the mythology and how the text is not the full story, and how as a culture and as a consciousness, we can interact with these archetypes, with these mythologies. That's how we sort of can sometimes work with astrology in a really profound way, is to go with the mythology quite deeply and to reimagine and re-understand some of these significations. When thinking about goddesses, I mean, I've got Cassandra Speaks right there that my mum's just lent me to read. And I just finished reading a short story called Galatea by Madeline Miller, which is the reimagining of the story of Pygmalion from the statue's perspective. And it's quite brisk, it's quite a difficult read. There's a lot of reclamation that happens in that story. Sometimes, you know, Pygmalion, it's My Fair Lady, essentially. It's the sort of perfect image of femininity as constructed by the hands of the creator, Pygmalion. Unsatisfied with the opportunities or the options for love, he creates the perfect woman, and then they live happily ever after. That's the ancient story. In this retelling, there is an abuse that occurs there, and there is a disregard for the humanity of Galatea. And there's vengefulness, there's a revenge that happens there too. When I think of my own personal goddesses, Aries rising, I think about the character Catwoman, specifically as portrayed by Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie Batman Returns in 1992. To look at the chart of that movie speaks to Catwoman, the essence, being a Gemini. dual in nature. Mask on, mask off, light and shadow. A very busy mind. The movie premiered on the 16th of June in 1992 at about 5 p.m. in Hollywood. And at that time, the sun was in Gemini in exact conjunction at 26 degrees with the asteroid Venus, with the planet Venus, I should say. Art, beauty, love, creativity, the femme, the power of the femme, the power in vulnerability, the power in such an intimate emotional portrayal of a comic book character, written by the hand of man, Bob Kane, in 1940, but reimagined and imbued with an essence of ferocity and of tenderness by one of the most brilliant actresses that we've had the opportunity to watch. It's nice how astrology can give our lives context like that sometimes. I have a Gemini moon placement, and so internally, my body, my emotional ecosystem can only regulate if I talk about it. And I'm learning that. For the longest time, I was frightened to talk about it, or I was frightened to look at the light and shade of my makeup. I was afraid to bring it up again. Couldn't name it. I couldn't find the language to name it. It's different now. I'm getting there. And I use Catwoman as my sort of totem. Sometimes I feel that I've outgrown her, which is good and positive. Sometimes she comes back to me, which is familiar and sacred. I think as I've gotten older too, my understanding of the character and of the quite obvious trauma response that the individual is in comes to me in deeper, richer ways. That compulsion to slash everything to the ground and to cut it away can sometimes be really huge. Speaking of, your guiding light, the planet Mars, has just been through a trial by fire in Scorpio. They're starting a new cycle as of now, on the 18th of November, I think it was. And just as the sun has entered Sagittarius, Mars followed soon after, and the day before this full moon, Mars will be forming square, pressure, tension with Saturn in Pisces. And so Saturn is kind of like the daddy of the zodiac, the one with really tough, stringent lessons, boundaries, and consequences. And so when we think of Pisces, for you, Aries rising, Pisces rules your 12th house of your unconscious, mystical, private spirituality, your psychology in some way, perhaps your access to philosophies on past lives, or perhaps in the ways that your internal workings operate. It would explain your intuitive prowess and your ability to identify how people are feeling, perhaps before they've had the conversation. But Saturn brings boundary and restriction and limits. Perhaps, depending on how old you are, you have a Saturn placement in Pisces, and so you may have just gone through or experiencing your Saturn return. This pressure with Mars, your guiding light, in Sagittarius in your 9th house of your philosophical leanings, of your spiritual search, feels like tension. There feels like maybe there's some things that are sort of burning up as far as your faith is concerned, or what you did have faith in. And perhaps there's sort of like a force from Saturn urging you to reassess your faith or to find better language for it. It's hard, Aries rising, and I'm with you. When I think of Sagittarius, we think of the Temperance card in Tarot. You can see that mirroring of the red wings of the angel. This time, the Temperance angel is the one that is mixing water, Pisces, with fire, Sagittarius. There's a balancing that can happen here. There's alchemy. Our emotions can sometimes stop us in our tracks when it comes to our fire when it comes to our drive, our passion. We can become overwhelmed emotionally that it just stops everything in its tracks. We become uninspired. In the other way, our creativity can boil over our emotions. Our energetic drive can make our emotions turn to anger. Perhaps this is what that Mars influence is doing. Perhaps there's a lot of anger that you're feeling right now, and you're not quite sure of where to place it. I don't think that you would be alone in that idea, Aries rising. There's a lot of anger at present. There's a lot of sorrow and fear and sadness right now. And we're all trying our best to find the most productive avenues and pathways in order to be of service, to help, to put our resources, limited or otherwise, to better use in times such as these. There's also a question of faith for a lot of folks too. I've been listening to a lot of astrologers that I really admire, and their capacity for language at this time is really valuable. And I've learned so much about them, from them, about astrology's purpose in times such as these. There's something foreboding about sort of reading the planets and reading the patterns of the sky and predicting disaster, or trying to explain, astrologize away the current status of life on Earth. That can feel really cold and detached, and it can almost feel like, either in one example, like love and light, everything happens for a reason, or it can feel like a vengeful sort of god or a vengeful goddess, which is a philosophy that has caused such damage and I don't believe is helpful. And so astrology can't align itself with that. We've got to keep two realities alive: the physical lived experience of what is going on. How can we strategize and use our Gemini-ness to think of the best way to help out? And how can we look to the planets as a mirror to give our lives context, even if that action is just as simply as an enforced way of practicing mindfulness, to have our mind climb down from the potential threat into our physical reality at this moment when we are not in danger, if we are not in danger. The moon is triggering the 8 of Swords right now. So this card does speak about anxiety and trigger response and recollection of trauma. Because in fact, this person isn't as stuck as they feel. If they took their blindfold off, they could find the way out. They could find the way through this cage. And so we wish them the best. And we recognize that when we feel like that, a great tactic is mindfulness, to try and climb down from the Gemini mind into the physical reality. Of course, that's easier said than done. Not everyone has the privilege of doing so. But if you're in this crossroads of wondering how to activate, what to say, what to do at a time like this, and if you're also feeling a bit of a crisis of faith, then hopefully this reading can guide you to a space where you can recognize that both are valid. But we're not about to love and light and happy thoughts anything away. That we are being required to put our energy where we can afford to put it, to be of help and to be of support for folks that are suffering. I'm going to get you some tarot, Aries rising. Gemini is always a tough one. I've come to understand that this time of year for me, because I'm a Gemini moon, will always be a bit of a Catwoman moment. I've had the opportunity to go back over life and back over my diaries and things like that, and recognize that around this time of year, not annually, but definitely as a sort of pattern, my Gemini moon becomes a little triggered. At a Gemini full moon, my propensity to dissociate might emerge, or my reactivity, my anger, my frustration, my sorrow. After anger always comes sorrow. And so it's up to me to sort of find the appropriate avenues and tools to regulate and to work with these feelings and heal from them. Not that it's over forever, but you understand, like, it's sort of light and shade. That's the best lesson from Gemini, is that there's both involved and invited and included in our makeup. So Scorpio season has been such an incredible test and trying time. If we think about Mars as your guiding light, Mars just went through a trial by fire in Scorpio, in your 8th house of your access to grief, to the harsher, intense, pivotal emotions of life. Your 8th house brings your resources and interweaves them with somebody else, and you sign contracts in life and you make obligations to the well-being of others in the 8th house, and you learn how to say goodbye to them too. And so Mars, being your guiding light, has just been in exact conjunction with the Sun on the 18th of November. So we begin a new Mars cycle for the next 2 years, which is how long it takes Mars to go around the zodiac. There will be a scorpionic sort of feeling about Mars's intent. And so there will be things that have been latent for a time that will be brought to the surface. There will be strategy that is enacted in order to be brave and to face what we need to face. I can understand that this might be exhausting for you at this time, but the 10 of Wands in reverse speaks to there's still more gas in the tank for you, Aries rising. A rest is probably what you need. Trust that you've got the stuff and the energy to keep going. The 10 of Wands feels like a pyre, the final hurrah of magic. Set it all alight. Not at this time, because what you've learned about hard work and productivity, not in the sense of being a cog in a wheel and not in the sense of proving your worth, but when the going gets tough, having your feet firmly planted in the ground, rolling up your sleeves, and when having energy enough, knowing how to vest that energy and how to work. That's really obvious right now, Aries rising. The Page of Pentacles is someone who sort of had that from birth. They were raised on those principles of grit and determination being valuable. And Aries rising believes that to be so too. So for the next 2 years, keep in mind this: your valor is attached to strategy, perhaps rather than head first. That's your reading, Aries rising. Thank you for your patience in my absence. I love you very much. If you can think of someone that might like a reading with me, we are coming up to gift giving season. So send me an email at yourok@umaruby.com and I can organize a voucher for you to gift them when the time is right. If you'd like me to read for you, go ahead and book at umaruby.com. I'll read your chart. They look something like this, and I'll post you the hard copy after the fact. If I've read for you before, there's always an option to come back. There are many different pathways that we can take. Magic, love, growth, truth are all different avenues that we can go down and ask the tarot what we need to ask them. You can tip me at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and there's also the option to subscribe for $10 Australian a month there too. That would be very much appreciated. Much love to you, Aries rising. Good faith, good healing, good luck. Hello, Leo Rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon, happening on Monday, the 27th of November at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. And if you find yourself close to me on the globe, look out to the eastern horizon at 8:15, because you'll see that the moon, as it's rising, will be its fullest. And so this will be your opportunity to say what you need to. It's a Gemini full moon, so we're going to be in deep conversation. There's going to be a lot that needs to be said that can be let off our chest back to this moon. Now for you, Leo rising, Gemini does rule your 11th house. And this is where we think about our friendship circles, the folks that we roll with, the communities that we've developed. It also has a lot to do with our feelings and regard for humanity itself. And so you can see at this time, there's a lot that is being said. There's a lot that needs to be said about a grasp on humanity. There's questions about where is the humanity at this time, and probably some things that you're feeling that are really coming bright and bold to the surface. So in opposition to Gemini, where the full moon will be, is Sagittarius, and that's your 5th house of your individual self-expression, your creativity, your artistry, your voice. And so the sun has just entered Sagittarius, and also Mars has entered Sagittarius. Now, the day before this full moon, the planet Mars will have formed an exact square with the planet Saturn. Now, these two planets, Mars and Saturn, are what we call the malefics, which means that they are the ones that bring the harsher lessons or the harsher reality to our lives. They kind of don't mince words. Mars can represent vitality and stridency. Sometimes it can represent aggression. And Saturn represents boundary, restriction, tougher lessons, authority. And so you can see when these two particular kinds of feelings are in attack, it can result in trauma. On a global sense, we can see that happening. On an internal sense, or a private micro reality, there might be some friction between the way that you're expressing yourself, your sense of belonging in the community, or perhaps the human species at large, and that square, that pressure back to Saturn, and that boundary that's being instigated in your 8th house of grief, of loss, of energy interwoven and intertwined with other folks. There's a grand lesson that's unfolding in that place for you, Leo rising, at this time. It feels kind of like a leveling up, or the next chapter unfolding in your maturity to be able to deal with these tougher realities of life. Saturn in the 8th house, I imagine, would feel a certain level of fear attached to that. We know that Pisces, the sign, wants to connect, wants to bring energy, feelings, people together, wants to remind everyone that we are all the same. But at times such as these, there's the astrological philosophy, there's sky mapping like this, there's also a kind of colder, harsher sense of reality that we're grappling with right now. And perhaps this friction is needing for you to have a little moment with the moon to remember your longing to belong. Leo is a lion. Lions travel in packs. There's not really something sort of solitary about a lion's movements, even though there is definitely a sense of individual creativity and boldness attached to the lion and to Leo. but they do move and roll with other beings. And so I imagine in that way, Leo rising, your 11th house is incredibly important to you. In the tarot, Gemini is represented by the Lover's card. And this is about communion, about coming together. It's also about refracting and reflecting. The best relationships that we come into contact with are with folks that we see ourselves in, and also hopefully that they can see themselves in us too. If you're a Leo rising, that's part of your mission here, is to provide the opportunity for other folks to see themselves in your beautiful power, in your image, in your skill, and for you to lead from your heart and to say, you can too. I believe you. I'll show you how. In friction like this, because Mars will be affecting this moon, as will Saturn. There's something about coming off in a way that is clunky, that is hurtful, that is painful. And this isn't to say that the way that you choose to express yourself is wrong, absolutely not. But I don't wish for it to put you at a further distance from this sense of belonging and communion that you so crave. If we look at the other characters that are playing out in Sagittarius at this time, it's kind of like an influx of fire. We haven't had this amount of fire in the astrology for the last couple of months. It's been mostly water and earth. But as at the ringing in of Sagittarius season, here comes Mars, here comes Mercury, here comes Ceres, the asteroid. Now Mercury is the planet that does feed us information, can go either way too. Mercury in Sagittarius is not at home. They're much more comfortable and much more effective in the opposite sign, in Gemini. And so in Sagittarius, there might be something about crossed wires or miscommunication. The sort of maleficence of Mercury might come out to play in Sagittarius. And right now, Mercury, at this full moon, I should say, Mercury is forming square with Neptune in Pisces as well. So that sort of illusion and that sort of hope to find that pattern in the interwoven nature of you and the other, and sort of the willingness to sort of approach grief, the way that you feel connected to those that are gone, perhaps, and the messages that you feel are coming through you from them. Mercury is arguing with that element in tandem with speaking to, with warmth and with clarity, the dragon in your 9th house of philosophy, astrology, mind expansion, knowledge. This is an area of your chart that you're going to feel compelled to over the coming 20 months. So take the hint, Leo rising. Learn more. In times of such critical horror, everyone is feeling in some way powerless. And there's a lot of fear at present. Because if we go back, we can use the astrology to do that. We can use our memory. Life on planet Earth has been fraught for some time, and it's been growing in intensity. And there's a lot of fear and powerlessness that folks are feeling right now. And there's a lot of reaction that is happening right now. There is a lot of grief that affects folks in variant ways to their personal lives. It's a tragedy. And I've been learning and absorbing as much as I can. I missed giving horoscopes the last moon because I didn't have anything to say. I thought to myself, what's the point in seeing a pattern if you can't do anything to stop it? But I'm strengthening my understanding of why it is I do this work. I do it to allow a moment to reflect and to actively use the technique of mindfulness to bring my anxiety and my fear back to my physical reality. This is what Gemini does so easily, is it does get in lockstep. There can be windmills of fear, trauma, anxiety. In fact, the moon at 4 degrees of Gemini is speaking to the anxiety card in the tarot, the 8 of Swords, the cage that can sort of build up around someone because of the truth. Sometimes the truth is really sharp and really painful. We've got these minds and we have this privilege to be able to learn techniques to climb down out of that anxiety, to recognize that we can develop tools to move forward and move through some of this jail. And folks are doing that in private as well as in the public forum. And there are resources available to all of us in times where we're unsure of how to be of best help, of what we can do actively in reality to put our voices or our efforts towards some kind of solution through crisis. We must respect that there's a great deal of good work that is happening in private too. Now, I'm going to get you some tarot, Leo rising, just as I have a little it might be worth talking to Ceres, just as I pull out these cards too, because I did notice that the asteroid Ceres is at 0 degrees of Sagittarius. So at this full moon, it's in fact Ceres that will be in exact square with Saturn. And Ceres is our goddess of agriculture and of growth, the one that taught folks how to sustain from the earth's resources. Ceres was the mother of Persephone, or Proserpina in the Roman. And there's an asteroid for Proserpina too. And Proserpina is in near exact conjunction with Neptune. The story of Ceres is, and here she is right in the center. Sometimes when I see the Queen of Pentacles, I know to speak to Ceres. So let's continue. Proserpina, Persephone, was stolen by Pluto and dragged to the underworld and violated. And Ceres, her mother, went on a solo mission, and I think for 10 days was in grief and did not eat and did not sleep, but was in search of her daughter to find what was rightfully hers and to bring her back. And there's a lot of mythology related to the seasons of Earth that are attached to the mythology of Ceres, because when finally she found her daughter, she found Proserpina, Persephone, there was a bargain that was struck that Pluto would relinquish control over Persephone, except that he would get her every year. And so Persephone made the long journey back to the underworld once a year to be with Pluto. And so in that journey down to recall, to take back, the earth fell into autumn and to winter, and the crops were not fertile and not regenerative. When thinking about the mythology of Ceres, thinking about that sort of instinct to protect and to nurture and to care, we're talking right now to your fifth house, your self-expressive side, Leo rising. And so, of course, there is absolute bravery and valor and integrity to what you wish to do, what you're hoping to achieve. I think that what we've got here is the King of Swords. So I want to speak about this idea of getting a greater clarity or a greater handle on the mind and things like anxiety, things like depression, things like fear, the way that our brain, the wedges of it, have control over us in different ways. So perhaps for some folks, I can speak from personal experience, the freeze response has been overwhelming at times over Scorpio season just gone. A tremendous feeling of being trapped, back to that Eight of Swords. And so the series of it all, the protector, the nurturer, would witness something like this and understand the commitment to going and retrieving what has been taken. I think about depression a lot when I think about Ceres. I think about the terror that someone who experiences or has danced with depression can feel when they feel it on the onset, when they can feel it emerging. That can throw us into a trigger response because it's a worry or a terror of something terrible happening again. And it takes the Ceres in us to make the commitment to hold audience with Pluto again and to come back. And sometimes it takes folks around us that are invested in our well-being to come and sit and feed and help through that time. I'm sure you can attest, Leo rising, that when you have folks in your life that do feel like this, you can witness their difficulty with the duality of their emotions, or there is time for them to be the Persephone. Your commitment to them does not waver, and your patience to go down and to sit with them is bold and mighty. And so for that we thank you. This agitation and this fight response perhaps is different to the freeze coming from other folks. Use your skills. Go with what you know, Leo rising. This version of the Three of Wands is a fortune teller, the mystic, the one that we come to and that we get hypnotized by their eyes. 10 out of 10, folks always come for healing in some way. They come to be listened to. They come to be regarded. That's the great thing about astrology and the tarot, is it gives someone the opportunity to hear about themselves without having to do so much of the talking. So use your skills, light your candles in a Sagittarian kind of way. When I think about the elements in the fire signs, I think of Aries as a match. I think of you as a bonfire that we worship around. And I think of Sagittarius as an altar of candles, magic mastered. That's what you do, Leo rising. So continue to do that. Resist the argument, but if you need to go there, then go there. But make sure that there's a good deal of aftercare involved in that too, because it's triggering right now across the board. People are reacting and people are remembering what it feels like to be subjugated, to be ostracized, to have violence enacted against them. And so hold your intent in your heart moving forward, Leo rising. That's where you emanate from. I'm seeing green right now. That's the pull from the heart. Move forward and show us the way with bravery, with might, and with tenderness. That's your reading, Leo rising. I adore you. I really do. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for your patience in my absence. Scorpio season, as I said, packed a punch. But here we are. Let's get back on the back of the horse. Let's follow the centaur. Let's learn from this as much as we can. Let's include the shadow in our search for light. And let's have the patience enough, like Ceres, to hold vigil as she gently waits for Persephone to come back to life. We're entering gift-giving season, Leo rising, so if you think that there's someone that you can think of that would like a reading with me, send me an email at yourok@umaruby.com and we can arrange a gift certificate for them to book when they feel like it. If you'd like me to read for you, by all means, head to umaruby.com and book yourself a reading with me directly. If I've read for you before, there is an option in the Back for More section on the bookings page if you'd like another audience. You can support my horoscope work here at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and you can subscribe for $10 a month. You can also throw some money in the tip jar too. That would be very much appreciated at this time. Much love to you, Leo rising. Be bold, be bright, be a cat like Catwoman. FYI, Catwoman is a Gemini. I go on the principle of the movie Batman Returns being released on the 16th of June, 1992. At 5 p.m, the movie premiered, and the sun was in Gemini in exact conjunction with Venus. So maybe go over your Catwoman myth. Come to understand it. Come to learn it. Meow. Hello Sagittarius rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon, happening on Monday the 27th of November at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. And if you are close to me on the globe, you might want to look to the eastern horizon at 8:16 p.m. because as the moon rises that night on Monday, it will be exactly full. And so this is going to be our opportunity to unleash in conversation, maybe with the moon, to talk about how our seventh house, our relationships, our loved ones, our colleagues, our clients, how these relationships have developed since the last new moon in Gemini 6 months ago, but also just at this time. There might be some great things that you have gratitude for. There might be some things that you need to get off your chest as well. So we're in Sagittarius season, so happy birthday if you're a Sagittarius sun. And it's coming at a fairly tense time, I might say. The planet Mars, who brings with it vitality, activation, definitely sometimes aggression, the day before this full moon formed an exact square pressure with Saturn, another planet that brings a lot of intense lessons and boundary to us. Mars and Saturn are both called the malefic planets, which means that they are the ones that have the harsher qualities about them. There's not really a great opportunity to sort of love and light anything with these two present, and a square between these two particular energies is quite severe. So this is the day before this full moon. In fact, at this full moon, that square will still be fairly close. So if we think about the sun warming up Sagittarius, the moon lighting up Gemini, if you're a Sagittarius rising, that's your sense of self and your sense of the other. What I really love for you, Sagittarius rising, is that in tarot, it's the Lover's card that we speak to when we talk about Gemini. And so you can see that beautiful reflection in triptych here. Perhaps there's two individuals and they're shooting their love, which has grown wings to one another. That's a nice way to look at this. Another thing to remember is that Pisces, where Saturn is your fourth house of your roots, your ancestry, your sense of safety and belonging. And so Saturn has been there since mid-year, since we've been dealing with Saturn in Pisces energy for most of this year, and we will do for the next few years. And a square pressure between your vitality, your relationships, and your roots feels a little sore. There might be sort of something about loss here that might be twigging your emotional self at this time. When you think about your relationships, your nearest and dearest, those you hold close, there might be something of a boundary around the ancestry of your nature. There might be relationships that you've had to say goodbye to that come up in memory. There might be things about feeling constricted in your home environment or having to take extra responsibility in that space that has you shouting like Gemini can sometimes do. Gemini is an air sign, and like you, Sagittarius, you're mutable fire, so you're like a candle. Gemini is mutable air, so there's something sort of like the clouds moving by, you know? The moon at 4 degrees of Gemini is represented by the 8 of Swords in the tarot. So this is something that feels like anxiety. It feels like a cage of the mind, perhaps of memory. We do encourage the figure in this card to remember their autonomy and remember that they've got the tools enough to get out of this moment, to move through. They're not as trapped as they think they might be. So that's just something to sort of meditate on too, Sagittarius rising. There's a lot of activity in your first house if you're a Sagittarius rising. So along with the Sun and with Mars forming this pressurized point, hopefully that there's not too many difficult conversations to have, although there might be some arguments. And that's part of life, isn't it? There's also Mercury in Sagittarius too. Now at 24 degrees, Mercury is forming square pressure with Neptune in Pisces at 24 degrees. So again, there's something about Mercury which is communicative, and Neptune can speak to delusion. There might be something about a lack of faith, or there might be something about a harsher conversation about your interests coming from folks in your fourth house and your ancestry, or there might be some greater conversation around the mysticism of your ancestors that feels kind of constricted or bound. In recent history, there was sort of a less access to that part of life. The beautiful thing about Mercury, though, is in square with Neptune, it's also forming trine with the dragon's head in Aries. So we go back to your 5th house of how you're expressing yourself, where you'll be urged to follow over the next 18 months or 20 months. The dragon will be bringing extra emphasis on this part of your life. So it sort of feels like there's like a sort of like wiggling out here, or a sense of like individuation that might be felt. What's probably good to remember is that if Gemini is the Lovers in tarot, you're Temperance. And I like these. This is the Lisa Sterl Modern Witch Tarot, but you can see there's an echo between those two, the same beautiful bright red wings. The angel in Temperance knows how to mix fire and water, how to alchemize, how to make and create with those two polarized elements that can sometimes put one another out. The water can boil because of the fire can extinguish because of the water. Our emotions, our magic, our creativity, our feelings. Some of the most creative people I know have a dance that they dance with their emotional selves, with their feelings. Sometimes for a creative person, the most terrifying thing can be inaccess to inspiration, that feeling of having none of the ideas flowing through. But Mercury in your first house, speaking to the dragon, whatever difficult terrain that we're following here with these conversations, that's what Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So we're having a conversation about two versions of conversation. Mercury in Sagittarius has a difficult time because they're in the opposite sign that they rule. So coming from you, perhaps the words it's difficult for you to find them. But at times like this, sometimes the cat does have your tongue, and that there might be different ways that you can express yourself that don't have so much to do with sort of righteousness or trying to be right, trying to find the words in order to act. I think there's a lot of us at the moment where the cat has our tongue. Speaking of Gemini, I've got this theory that Catwoman is a Gemini because when Catwoman was brought to me, my consciousness, when I was 8 years old, when the movie Batman Returns premiered on the 16th of June in 1992, the sun was in Gemini in an exact conjunction with Venus, triggering my moon sign in Gemini. And so I kind of have that feeling of duality within myself, but something that I identified with too from very, very young, in a way that was less to do with the language, that perhaps I didn't understand so much about the adult themes of that presentation, but the image, the creative side, the beautiful emotional feelings that were brewing up within me, watching Michelle Pfeiffer perform as Catwoman, have stayed with me for my whole life. As an adult, I know exactly how that's related to Gemini, that character, the difficulty with duality, the light and the shadow, the sort of endless internal conversation that happens there too. Boundary is good in the fourth house if it's time for us to start setting them with our ancestors or our caregivers or our family, our bloodlines. That's just come to me too. I hope that you're not feeling so creatively blocked. In fact, I think that that's going to ease as well, Sagittarius rising. It looks as though the dragon will be urging you to create over the next 2 years. Perhaps there's something that's sort of like a sketch at the moment that will really flesh out over this time. Yeah, absolument. I got a lot of pentacles here. I got the King of Pentacles and the Page of Pentacles, and I got the Ten of Swords, which is an ending of a very difficult thought form, a very difficult battle with the mind. In tarot, the swords represent our mind, our thoughts, as do the air signs, which is probably why Gemini, Aquarius and Libra all are quite intelligent but quite sort of active in their mind. Whatever's been sort of pulling on you at this time, Sagittarius rising, could be memories, it could be the reality of what is going on in our sense of humanity at this time, the pain that is so palpably felt. If you can use your Sagittarius essence, if you can use the part of you that is willing to alchemize with the fire. When I think of Sagittarius, I think of candles, I think of magic harnessed. If you can remember that that is sort of intrinsic in your nature, Sagittarius rising, then you can put those skills to good work. The page and the king are two folks that belong to the earth, to the tangible reality of this life. You can actually turn the magical side of you, your imagination, your creativity, your art. You pick a word that works for you, but you can make that real, you can make that tangible and make that a reality. You probably already have, but this is a continuum. This is something that is reminding me that Sagittarius rising is ruled by the earth in esoteric astrology. So you know how there's a planet that rules each of the signs? Well, in one way of looking at it, the earth is included, and it's only Sagittarius that has the earth to answer to. The earth itself and the way that it moves, the way that nature evolves and cycles around is all to do with the essence of your soul. So maybe there's parts of you that sort of feel maybe not ashamed, but kind of reluctant to continue imagining at this time because of the pressing matters that are so urgent. If creativity stops, then everything stops. This is part of being proud of being a human. Some people have difficulty with that too. But if we're going to look at our species and look at the attributes that separate us from the rest, that's unfair, because the earth creates and makes patterns in its own beautiful way. Every species does have its own beautiful relationship with creativity, but perhaps it's us that have found the language to describe that. And that's part of your mission here. Whatever you put your hand to is to make it more beautiful than you left it. So, at this full moon, eyes on your relationships and the pressure perhaps. Maybe there's stories or sadnesses that are being brought up again from your lineage. Difficult things to quantify or qualify, difficult stories that perhaps need to be told again too. Gemini is great in conversation. If you get them started talking, they won't stop, but the trick is sometimes to get them started. If there's things that do come up in these conversations that are harder to manage, then look to your creative self. Look to that dragon. Look forward to that dragon. Start a fresh sketchbook. Brainstorm some ideas. That's your reading, Sagittarius rising. I love you lots. We're moving into gift-giving season, so if you are wanting to gift a friend a reading with me, I will draw their birth chart that looks like this. You can email me at urok@umaruby.com and we can arrange you a gift certificate to give to your loved one. If you'd like me to read for you and I've not already, head to umaruby.com. If I've read for you before, head to umaruby.com and book yourself another reading. You can support my horoscope work over at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and you can subscribe for 10 Australian dollars a month. There's also an option to put in some money in the tip jar if that's what you'd like to do. Much love to you, Sagittarius rising. We're going to be moving with your vibe. We're going to be holding on to hope together. If there's anything that Sagittariuses do really well is make sense of the senseless. So let's get on the back of your horse. Where are we going? Take us there. There'll be a new moon in your sign in 2 weeks, so I'll be back with a horoscope for that one too. Much love to you. Take it easy. Talk about it. And if things get heated, take a break. But remember, resolution is how we're going to feel some relief. Don't leave things in a tense atmosphere if you can at all afford not to. And if you can't have these conversations that are burning away in deep inside of you, have them with the moon. Rapidly coming to realize that you can say whatever you want to the moon. It's her obligation to hold it and to take it. And she'll never leave you because of it. The asteroid Selena was in Gemini too at the premiere of Batman Returns. Selena's the goddess of the moon, also the namesake of Catwoman. Little intricate web of intricacies. That's it. I love you. Meow.